Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with a mod review. It's been a while actually, but a lot of modders have been waiting because there's been no news and these things do happen. But we're here with a rather interesting thing, a new mod by Rox. You might know him as he does a lot of mechanic mods for different playable factions. This is something completely different though. This is GRP brings Victoria free to Warhammer 3 beta. So what this mod is doing is essentially bringing paradox mechanics into Total War Warhammer, which is pretty interesting. I've had a decent amount of time to play with this last night as I couldn't sleep, and so it's going to be played with the Empire Secessionists, and this is going to give you a completely new campaign. If we look towards the faction effects, we have reform laws, reform society as peacefully as possible, base law and act chance plus 40%. This is part of your actual new stuff, by the way. A pioneer of science starts with all normal technologies unlocked and gains access to new tech groups. Trust me, it's not as broken as it sounds because a lot of stuff is kind of weird in a good way. Diplomatic relations minus 40 with Empire, Kislev, and Southern Realms. Diplomatic relations minus 40 with Cathay. Diplomatic relations minus 40 with Bretonians. Yeah, the human factions aren't going to like you too much, but don't worry, again, there's stuff in-game which kind of changes that. And finally, Lord effects. Well, the new Lord is obviously going to be wounded instead of killed off. Ability accusation, and finally passive ability by our blood, all units in army. This is going to be very similar to having a legendary lord which is focused around being a witch hunter more than anything. Well, this was the most basic stuff to explain. Now we're going to jump into the campaign because there's quite a lot to talk about. So your faction starts off in a pretty good place. Obviously this is Reichland and you start off with pretty much, well, almost the whole area. You just need to capture Altdorf, which really won't take you too long. You start off with 3 armies, and if you just use all 3 armies together to take Altdorf, you won't have too much of a problem. You will be in a negative for the very beginning. This is factors not only just for the armies that you use, but the other mechanics in place. But after that, then you can expand as normal. You are at a minus with diplomatic relations with pretty much every human faction, so do be prepared to fight in loads of different areas, but it won't take too long. In fact, it's only minus 15. Due to the mechanics already in place, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So when it comes to your legendary lord, this is Alexander, and he works in a very, very interesting way. So he can boost up your range units, you can make them quite powerful. In general, he's very much a witch hunter, huntsmaster general, but what makes him very interesting is actually when you start looking towards his unique line. The unique line itself is focused on laws, law enactment chance and so on. This is what's going to be a majority of the video. As, there's quite a lot of law stuff there, extra research rate, which is obviously going to be quite useful. You will notice that some of the laws even have a political power section. There's actually quite a bit here. But don't worry, it's not that complicated. It's something that you'll progress through naturally, and you'll see that when you go to the tech tree. So all the imperial techs are already yours. This is why your diplomatic relations with the other human factions isn't that bad, but you will notice that you have more tech, and these techs are the important ones. One is centered around actually focusing on your laws. Laws will be explained properly as we progress through this video, but you're going to want this if you want to just change around certain bonuses that you get faction-wide, which is going to help you out overall. So that was the society section, but there's also a production and military section, and these are actually quite interesting because they'll give you bonuses but also give you negatives. For example, really improving the missile strength of your Empire artillery, but making them cost a lot more. And yeah, it actually works out really well. There's some of them which only just have bonuses, and I think that actually helps quite a lot. But I think that making things cost more to making them a lot stronger kind of balances out a lot of different things. There's also some little effects there where a tech will not give you anything, but rather give you additional effects from certain buildings, which we're going to start going into now, so don't you worry. But it's actually a pretty good system, as the idea is that construction works very much the same as normal, but has extra effects. There are also some extra buildings that you will need to tech up to be able to get and so on, but certain buildings will give you political power and so on. Don't you worry, we'll start covering the power section in just a little bit, or take away power. However, there's other stuff which will allow you to get some extra effects, as you'll be able to see, which will reduce the upkeep for all your units with small firearms, for example, but you will need resources for it. So there are resources, we'll talk about that also soon, but I actually really like this because it makes you feel like, well, it's like Vicky Free essentially, and that's obviously the big inspiration you can tell from the mod anyway, but it makes it a lot more in-depth and in detail. Many of your buildings, even your landmarks, will also be affected, so there's quite a lot to play around with, there's a lot to explore. Some resource buildings will also change, as you would have seen there with the Empire, where you've got new ones like coal mines, and these will produce, well, you know, coal. The idea is that you're going to want to try and find out these resources, as you want coal to go to iron, and then afterwards the iron will then turn to steel. You know, you need both there, and it's a very, very important resource if you want certain bonuses. So you would have already noticed that there's a bunch of stuff at the top of your screen. So if we go to the top right hand side, we've got coal, iron, and steel. This is your main resource here. This is going to be a resource that you're going to be using to boost up your troops' capabilities. It's going to be a resource that you're going to be using to... I kind of like the idea of this as... yeah, the resources standard in vanilla... it's just like, oh, you use it for trade, but you're not actually using it for trade. It's just a modifier. So this is a pretty different system. And yeah, it works quite well if you can manage it well enough by capturing enough cities that produce these resources. While the bonuses themselves are quite strong, you won't be able to make use of this all the time, and you won't be making use of it very early on, so it does balance out quite well. Then you start looking towards the other stuff, right? On the middle, which is basically just the Eye of the Gods table, it's your 4 main sections, right? So you've got the nobles, you've got the church, you've got the actual common people, and then finally you've got tycoon. And as you can see, there's bonuses and negatives. The idea is to keep this as high as possible, but you will lose percentage as time progresses, depending on what buildings you build to. I really like this. It's a system which obviously makes use of the Northskin mechanic as the Northskin framework, but turns it into something completely different, and it's very, very heavily inspired from Victoria Free, which is a game that everyone had been waiting for, but just didn't release in a great way. I think the main issue with Vicky Free was like the lack of proper war mechanics, but in general, this works really well. There's a lot of mathematics involved, but if you're interested in paradox games, if you like paradox games, then you're not going to really have an issue with this type of mechanic for this faction. And now for the laws themselves, which I used a cheat mod just to be able to unlock them faster, as you'll only start off with very basic laws and human right laws, and then as the time progresses, as you start researching, you'll be able to get more. And you can see here that you can get loads of really cool bonuses. So in the most basic form, they'll help with political power and stuff, and the idea is to actually give you a reason to go get the other bonuses, but they'll also provide some certain bonuses here and there too. You'll see extra research rates, you know, or extra income from all buildings faction-wide. There's a lot of different things that you will need to use. And the interesting thing that you might have noticed is that some laws are tied to others, so you can see that you will have resources which just look like the canopic jars, but they're actually just a marker to say, you know, you need to enact this law to be able to get that law. It's a pretty interesting system because obviously you can't have everything just overlapping itself, because this is also going to get you some bonuses overall. I really, really do like the system. You can see a lot of the bonuses on the top left-hand side. There's a lot there. There is absolutely a lot. So you can see that the serfdom law changes, gives you different powers. So these different laws are going to be very important for you to cycle between to be able to get a very different campaign. The great thing is, considering how much there is here, you are able to basically just get a lot of replayability with this faction, which, yeah, it's tied to this specific faction, but then you can use a movement mod to move the legendary lord to some other place, and then you can just start there. The important thing to remember when you play this campaign is that you're going to have to keep an eye on your buildings, because there's so many new buildings, and you're supposed to use this as you expand. Obviously, when I'm showcasing it here, it's because I'm using a cheat mod. I've had enough time to play with it, so I'm not really feeling an urge to expand at this point, because obviously this is just footage for a video. But yeah, it's super, super cool. I really, really like this. I think it's really, really well inspired. So I had a little bit of experience with this mod, and I just want to talk about it whilst just some random footage plays on the background regarding the mod. It's pretty interesting. It's very, very stylized. It's definitely a unique campaign, which I really like. As we know, the Empire is one of the most popular factions, and the problem is that right now they haven't received a lot of content. They do deserve a lot more, so this kind of gives you reason to play as the Empire again. Not only that, but yeah, it's cool. It's actually really, really cool. I played for a few hours last night. Like I said, I couldn't sleep, and yeah, it was very different. Harder difficulties will prove to be quite different to your normal style, as yeah, player bias kicks in. You've got a lot of factions who might not have the -40 as the faction effects actually say, but rather, you know, -15 and stuff, but that still leads into player bias. You're gonna have to deal with a few different enemies coming at you, but you're still getting the benefits of, you know, like the Ifean caravan. So as long as you can hold this and take out Marienburg quite quickly too, that's the main areas for the caravan, so you'll still be getting some cash coming in. As long as you know how to protect your borders, and yeah, don't be afraid to disband the other armies if you don't need them, because they will become an issue with cash and so on, then you should be fine. It's not an easy campaign, like I said, but it's definitely something that's very satisfying. I think the originality of this mod really just gives it a bit of a shine here. And it's not like you need it, but if you're looking for another excuse to play as another Empire campaign, this is definitely something that you're going to want to try out at least once. And you've got some time until the next DLC. We know it's coming in April, so you might as well give this a shot. It's really stylized. You can find it down in the description below. Let me know what you guys think about this mod in the comments below. I'm actually quite surprised that it's not gotten so much traction just yet, because Rox's mods are always very, very popular. So if you're a fan of Rox's other mods, you're definitely going to like this. But with all that being said, guys, have a nice day. I'll see you all again very, very soon. And yeah, I've got hopefully some pretty interesting stuff coming next week.